Well, hello there. Answer me this. Question number 4. And today's question is from Ida. And the question is about Christians and euthanasia. And the question is as follows. Is it all right to help someone end their lives in cases where there is unbearable suffering? And yeah, so that's quite a question. Obviously, Ida works at a hospital, and I know there are many of you that work at hospitals and are near to suffering like that. So this is a real question. The best I can do this morning is to give some things to think about, some questions to ask yourself, and in relation to in relation to this question. So, when is it justified to kill another person? Really, that's what that question is, right? Now, we call it all kinds of things. Be physician-assisted suicide. Sometimes it's called death with dignity or mercy killing. But in the end, it's really about finding a justification to kill another person, to end another person's life. So, first of all, I would say that there's a difference between allowing someone to die and taking steps to end someone's life. For instance, taking someone off of a ventilator or refusing another program of chemotherapy. Those are things that many people decide, and that's different than taking a lethal dose of morphine or whatever it is they put in that pill to end a person's life. Okay, so there's a difference between those two things. The next thing to think about is, what is unbearable suffering? Because that's part of the question, right? So when is it all right, or is it okay to end someone's life in the case of unbearable suffering? So we have to define what unbearable suffering is, or when does suffering become unbearable? And then we say, oh, okay, red flag, this person's suffering is unbearable, we need to end their life. So the problem with that question is it's extremely subjective, right? So I hear people use these kinds of measurements. So how is your suffering today? Is it a 5? Is it an 8? And so subjective. So you've heard of the expression, oh, he has a man cold, right? So some people feel pain more than others, or maybe they're unable to manage pain as much as other people. So does that mean that men should be euthanized more than women, because it seems like men are less able to manage pain than women are? So something to think about. The next thing is this. What about people who lose their ability to think? Should we euthanize those people? In other words, they have Alzheimer's or dementia, where they begin to forget people, or forget people completely, where they forget where they are, they forget what's going on, they later unable to communicate, and really not able to care for themselves at all. Actually, it's kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of like a baby, right? Where you have to do everything for them. I don't know how much thinking is happening in there, but they certainly don't give you permission to do anything. You kind of know when something's not right by the noises they make, but we need to do everything for a baby. So I guess babies have potential, right? We think, and elderly people or terminally ill people don't have potential. So maybe we should have like a potential index, where if you rate high enough on the potential index, then you're allowed to live. And if you don't rate high enough on the potential index, then we euthanize you. Again, there would have to be someone that would make such a scale, right, and decide, oh, wait a minute, you don't have enough potential in your life, I'm sorry, you can't live. So something to think about. What if a person says they want to die? In other words, they give permission, for the end of their lives. So kind of like kind of like this. I see it like a man that's sitting on a bench in front of this big skyscraper, and he's making a deal with somebody else to sell the skyscraper. And of course, the question would have to be asked, do you have permission to sell this skyscraper? Does this skyscraper belong to you? Can you show me some proof that this belongs to you? Finding out that maybe this is just a bum on the street, right, who's trying to sell the skyscraper to somebody. So do you have the permission to end your own life? So what about suicide, though? Because that's the same, I give you permission. So when is suicide allowed and when is suicide not allowed? For instance, my wife left me, I lost my job, I was just diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. So which reasons are sufficient and which reasons are not? Oh yeah, you're allowed to commit suicide. Once, instead of jumping off Jacques Cartier Bridge, we have a pill for you because, you really need to commit suicide. So which reasons are sufficient and which are not? Some other questions to ask. What is a person? So how do we define, okay, you are a person and you are not a person, based on what criteria? And who decides whether someone is a person or not? Who gets to decide that? Who decides whether someone has enough quality of life? There's another term, quality of life, right? We decide, okay, you have this much quality of life, or you have this much quality of life, and if you have enough quality of life, then you are worthy of life, and we will allow you to live. If not, I'm sorry, you don't have enough quality of life, we're going to have to get rid of you. So who decides that, right? And so here's another one. Are they contributing members of society? So is someone contributing enough to society? If they're contributing members of society, then yes, they deserve life, and those who are not contributing because of illnesses, because of incapacitation or whatever it is, they are not contributing. Rather, society is contributing to them to take care of them. Maybe that's a reason to euthanize. So what about fear? Is fear of the future a reason to want to end your life? In other words, you are afraid of what's going to happen in your own life. You're afraid that you're not going to be cared for properly when you yourself get Alzheimer's or dementia, right? And so you make plans because you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to have to be cared for improperly by somebody. So fear of the future. Okay, let me read just a couple of verses, okay? Romans chapter 5, verse 3 says this: rejoice in our sufferings. And this is not the only passage. There are many passages that say exactly the same thing. So rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. So it doesn't say to run away from suffering. It doesn't say to avoid suffering. It says rejoice in our sufferings. James, the book of James, says this: count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Well, lacking in nothing except suffering. Basically, it says, when you go through suffering, and these things make you complete. In other words, there's a lot more to you than just your body and how your body feels. And there's so much we could read. Listen to Job. Job chapter 14, verse 5 says this: a person's days are determined. You, O God, have decreed the number of his months and have set limits he cannot exceed. And so here the idea, and not the only place, by the way, it's all over Scripture, that God has given limits. God has decided the number of days that we live. So, as Christians, we hold that we are created in the image of God. The value of human life in all its forms and at all stages, from before birth to old age, all stages. This is the central theme of the gospel, for it's the purpose of Christ's birth, death, and resurrection. So to fail to respect human life at any point of that life mocks the very essence of Christ's mission to humanity. One of the hallmarks of Christians, one of the hallmarks of Christianity, is the unstoppable desire to care for the sick and look after the unwanted. Mother Teresa would collect babies left for dead as garbage in the streets of Calcutta. And she did that for years because in each life she saw Jesus. And so she would bind up their wounds and she would feed them and she would care for them as though they were her own. And because every time she did that, she felt like she was feeding and she was caring for Jesus himself. This is the high value Christians attach to human life. When my wife and I would visit special needs orphanages, and we would meet girls and boys whose bodies had been disfigured by the use of thalidomide in early pregnancy, there was no question that every moment, every touch, every gift was a gift we felt, a gift that was given to God himself, because the image of God resides in every human being. And so as Christians, we fight to protect life, to find cures, to bring healing, relief from suffering. Or if we can't do one of those things, we comfort and we sympathize as people go through suffering. But we do not look for ways to end life because of suffering. So that's my view. That's how I begin, anyways, to answer this question. If you have any comments, you'd like me to talk a little bit further on this question, please ask away. Thanks so much for listening today. God bless.